Welcome back to Cybersecurity for Everyone. I'm Dr. Charles Harry. We've been talking about hacking as a process, and at the end of that process, hackers create an effect on the targeted machine. As you recall, hacking is a process, and it starts with the reconnaissance of the target, but leads to weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation of your malware, eventually setting up command and control networks, all to take an action on a target. It's kind of at the end of the day, that's why you're there. So what kind of effects do hackers generate? Well, hackers can generate a lot of different effects. Everything from stealing data to generating a disruption to a service or a process. Some of these impacts are going to be easily remedied. Still, others can be much more significant. So how do we measure the effects of a cyber event? Well, there are different ways to think about effects. So it could be everything from a loss of privacy to the number of records lost, revenue loss and response costs, market capitalization, brand effects, diplomatic impacts, even strategic stability. And so what constitutes a private problem versus a public concern? And how do we actually measure those effects? So what appears to be a fairly straightforward question gets really complicated. So what kind of effects do hackers generate? Well, there are what we call direct impacts, and this could be the confidentiality of data, the integrity of data, or the accessibility of a system. Any of those can be compromised. And so those are what we would term direct impacts. However, there are larger effects that can also cascade from those direct impacts. So it's not just about the single device that loses a bunch of records. There could be cascading impacts. So how do we create an inability to execute a business process? So for instance, hackers might affect the accessibility of a particular device in a phone center. That could create a real problem. There's also the potential of loss of confidence in your company. There could be a drop in share value. There could be physical impacts due to cascading failures. So if you gained access, let's say, to the sluice gates of a dam and opened them up and created a flood downstream, there could be a direct impact on the actual topology of the area that you're impacting. So there are effects on IT systems, right? Direct interactions between the hacker and specific devices. You can have data stolen. You can make things inoperable. And those effects might be measured in terms of amount of data loss or impacts to productivity. There could be those direct impacts on IT systems can cascade to effects on the enterprise. They could have direct impacts on human processes, right? Those IT systems support human processes like payroll. Those human processes support organizational goals, like the ability to manufacture tires. So effects in this case may be measured in terms of revenue loss, remediation costs, impacts to market capitalization, or even brand effects. And so those effects on enterprises can cascade to effects on society. So as specific organizations fail, they can impact even other organizations or individuals. If you have a particular port facility that is compromised, that could lead to a whole range of cascading effects on logistics supply chains for organizations downstream. So in this case, effects could be measured in terms of physical damage, impacts to the broader economy, or even changes in people's perceptions about information. So an example of that would be the recent ransomware attack on Garmin. So a threat actor tied to a Russian criminal group executed an attack against the Garmin Corporation in July of 2020. Ransomware, in this case, it was a variant called Wasted Locker, was used, but it created severe disruptions to the location services for over a week. So the original request by the threat actor was for $10 million. We're not quite certain how much they settled for, but the effects were broadly felt, not just on the specific devices impacted by the ransomware, but more importantly on the organizational process they support, the broader enterprise level goals, and even society in general that is reliant on Garmin devices. So there were specific effects on the IT systems. Russian hackers directly impacted specific machines that created direct impacts to productivity and access to data. But then those cascaded to the human processes that those IT systems supported, and they created outages and impacted revenue for the enterprise. And then the outages of services impacted millions of customers and businesses that were reliant on those Garmin GPS services. So what are some of the takeaways? Well, hackers can interact directly with devices to create an end effect, and those impacts can generate direct impacts. But those direct impacts can create cascading effects. And a cyber attack, therefore, can generate a range of impacts on IT systems, business processes, and the broader enterprise, or even to society at large. In our next module, we're going to explore this concept of effects much more deeply, and we'll talk about primary, secondary, and second order effects. I hope to see you next time.